Have you ever wondered why your favorite taco is costing you an arm and a leg these days? Or is your dream couch still in backorder status for months now? Join us as we go behind the scenes of the global supply chain. Let us discuss and understand its complexity and learn from the industry leaders, professionals, and subject matter experts. Expect in-depth analysis and genuine conversations about the major issues affecting the supply chain today. Welcome to Supply Chain Demystified. Your host is none other than the distinguished supply chain expert, Dr. Nick Valles. Professor Valles is the Academic Director of USC Marshall Global Supply Chain Management and Founding Executive Director of USC Marshall Randall R. Kendrick Global Supply Chain Institute.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Supply Chain Demystified. I'm your host, Professor Nick Valles, Founding Executive Director at the Kendrick Global Supply Chain Management Institute at the University of Southern California. What an exciting time to talk about artificial intelligence. Since the launch of ChatGPT in 2022, the world, as we know, changed about AI and how AI is going to transform everything we do. Today, our focus will be how this regenerative agentic AI network will influence the way the global trade, the global supply chains are going to be designed and executed. With me today, we have Paula Natoli, the head of supply chain at Google, and Manju, the CEO of Pluto 7, talking about AI and agentic AI and its influence on our global supply chain. Without further ado, please welcome Paula and Manju to Supply Chain Demystified.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So Paula, let's start with you. Google, data, AI, there is just incredible buzz to that. So while we're talking, we're going to talk about the trade and tariffs and the disruptions and all of those things. But let's dive right into it. You are in one of the most premium companies leading the AI innovations. Let's contextualize for the audience as to what does this mean? How are we going to see the AI applications in our world of global trade and supply chain?
Well, Nick, I think you hit on several important topics, and I tell you what, it is an exciting place to be right now, this intersection of technology in the world of supply chain. And while we're going to jump into where does AI fit and everything, I want to go back to the one point that you just mentioned. Maybe it passed it by a little bit, but that's the data. We have to remember that all of these cool things that we're going to talk about with AI is only applicable and available to do if we have the data necessary to run on it. So organizations have been spending a lot of time thinking through just their data strategy. Where does their data come from, right? We have a ton of internal data that's siloed and stored in multiple systems. We have community data. In a world of global supply chains, we're not short of interconnected nodes and organizations that have to share information and insights. And then we have external data as well. Information you mentioned, Nick, on tariffs, geopolitical issues, any other type of disruption and risk and weather. All of that has to come together before we can even start to think about these really cool AI applicabilities that we can put into place. So data first and foremost, but I think that serves as a great foundation. And, like you said, I'm thrilled to be in the position that I'm in the mixture of it all.
Well, Paula, so well articulated. The data is really the cornerstones and what's really going to drive this technology. Manju, welcome. And you are the Google Premium Partner, providing services of Google Cloud and all these new frontiers of AI. In your world, what do you hear for the audience? I'm sure you get taking phone calls from people across the country and internationally. What are the sentiments to that?
Nick, first of all, thank you for having me in the podcast. And Paula, it's great to hear your comments as well. We have been a partner with Google for the last 8 years, and also we have worked alongside you and your amazing organization at USC for nearly 8 years now. as I relate everything that we discussed in the last 8 years, connect the trade wars and tariffs and the human capital, and many things I heard at USC, and when I relate to many things that I heard from Google in the last 8 year partnership and where the world is heading, and there were two pivotal points that brought them all together. First, obviously, we all know COVID, and that was the time when people really started thinking about supply chain networks and the disruption and how they need to prepare. And while we observed that, enterprises did take a long time to change. However, this time it seems like it's bigger than COVID for the following reason. Like, you asked about what do we hear every day. Between you and Paula, both of you kind of said what and why. Then it comes to the how. That's when Lunasun gets plugged in by Google and working with the customers. On a daily basis, I'm in conversation both domestically and internationally, almost in most continents. Big and medium-sized companies, same problem. I want to do rapid scenario planning. I want to be able to make decisions faster, connect the data for me, help me with AI. Not just that, what are the best practices to handle the change management?
Fantastic. So I think we talked about the data as a foundation. Obviously, we talked about how these scenarios that we're going to have to start to work with, and not only be ready for it, but be proactive about it. But let me set the foreground for the audience so that we can contextualize how did we get here, right? So let's go back to World War II. In fact, I can go back maybe 1,000 years and set the stage for us. But let's actually use the World War II, post World War II as a sort of a pivotal point, right? So prior to that, if you were to look at the history, the major evolutions in terms of the industrial production would happen once every 500 years, right? And you can go all the way back to pre-Silk trade. The transformations were not in one's lifetime. You're lucky if it's in 3 or 4 generations, you're a major founding or major set of changes that transforms the society. World War II and post-World War II, that continued, but this timing of those disruptions and evolutionary cycles diffused to about 20 to 25 years, right? Now let's just go from World War II all the way to a peaceful transition into global trade. That takes us now into the 80s, right, where we started to build a global supply chain network. So when you think about industrial revolution, where Europe and America and the New World that drove majority, in fact, 92% of the GDP output from industrial revolutions came from these parts of the world, had a huge manufacturing base. Right, so in America, we use the term rush back, where from mines to stills to manufacturing of parts and assembly and production systems were established in very closed network. In many cases, outside of the raw materials, things were built very close to where the consumption was. 80s really started to open up the globalization, right? And a lot of the outsourcing boom that happened not only in the United States, but the global became like a sort of one single large manufacturing node in which China became the world's manufacturing factory. So that leads us all the way up to 2000 in transforming that. Right? In fact, one would actually, empirical data suggests that China in 3 decades built one of the biggest infrastructure of tier 1 and tier 2 cities, both physical and hard infrastructure as well as the soft infrastructure. But then from the technology side, we think of the World Wide Web, internet, in the cloud, and to Paula's point about the data. All of a sudden, there is a new concept of movements of goods and information in financial transactions. But it is not only about those dollar values, but the bytes
the data just started to accumulate and became just gigantic universe and galaxy of its own. So now we are transitioning, and you think about from worldwide web, it took us first to 18 months to have 100 million users. And I'm contextualizing this for you guys to sort of relate to this. If I remember my life pre-academia, I had proposed in a board meeting about transitioning to the cloud, moving some of our data for parallel sourcing to $6.5 billion hack, and I literally got chased out of the room because the concept of putting stuff in the cloud was not even possible. Let's come back to now. We live in cloud. Our lives actually, and information and interactions we have, it's all cloud-based, right? So we start to think about from 2000 on, that evolutionary curve has diffused now to almost every year. In fact, I would propose an onset of ChatGPT, which actually normalized AI. AI goes back into 70s and 80s. A lot of case studies were back in 70s and 80s. But just industrializing the concept of how to use regenerative AI opened up the new frontiers and possibility where things are now we're seeing this evolutionary diffusion is happening over 6 months. My feeling is that this will continue to get some shorter. And this is where, so now if we feel from World War II to here, the transformation curve is just getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And I think today, if we use that transformative force in our lives, and then couple that with the geopolitical uncertainty, and then the policy uncertainty, I would call this a perfect storm. So Paula, let me bring you to now, we're having this backdrop of this perfect storm. Share your opinion. Where did I miss in articulating this backdrop of our global trade, global supply chain fabric? I'd love to hear your perspective.
No, Nick, I think you're spot on. And what I love, the point that you raised is AI is not new, right? And in our world, it's been around for quite some time. We can look at that and say, I mean, we've been using machine learning to build a demand forecast, right? You name it, just in that kind of prediction side of the house. I think what's gotten interesting over the past 1 to 2 years with the rise of generative AI, and then now going into AI agents. And I think sometimes people get caught up in thinking that that's a maturity curve, right? That I kind of move from standard AI to generative, and now I do AI agents. When in fact, it's a matter of applying the right AI technologies to the right use cases, right? It doesn't mean that it's I move across the board. And frankly, I'd even get caught up where people start to even drop the term optimization, right? Optimization still has a place in our supply chain and global logistics world as well. So I think a lot of it is learning and applying the right tools and technologies into the right use cases to drive that. Each one of these types of AI serves its own purpose across all of our use cases that we have to deal with.
So, Manju, let's talk about Paula mentioned AI agents. So the agentic AI, right? I mean, it's a powerful tool, right? So for our audience to sort of get the perspective, when you say agentic AI, what does that mean? Give me a real example. How would you solve customers' problem using this agentic AI?
Yeah, I think probably that's the best way to really describe and demystify agentic AI. We had a customer, we had a customer who came with a specific problem. We run $40 million worth of ads, and our ads are for products like roof gutters. When it rains heavily, the gutters clog, and it can drain water. The person wants to get it fixed right away. The homeowner wants to get it fixed right away. It's a simple problem. But the challenge is your demand sensing, if the customer is interested, to fix has to happen in 24 hours. Which means you now need to match your demand signal with your inventory positioning at that geolocation and match the resource who can go fix it all in a matter of hours or even minutes, depending on how you look at it. And to do this, if you look at the sheer volume of number of requests you get when it rains or when the weather is bad, and the number of people they can possibly use to match and move the inventory, it's mathematically a very challenging problem for planners. So even if you take two planners, right, this is a multi-million-dollar enterprise, even if you take two planners, how much of mathematics can they do in optimizing inventory and demand in a given day? And just because you log off at 5 o'clock doesn't mean rain has stopped or the homeowners have stopped requesting. They're going to do it 24/7. And if you don't fulfill, they're going to another vendor who can do it. So this is one of the real world example of agentic AI where we deploy two agents, a demand agent and an inventory agent who will work 24/7. We'll do 10 times the mathematics of optimizing inventory. All we are doing is customer most likely is going to place an order for a gutter. They've not yet placed an order, start stocking inventory and get your resources lined up, because if the order comes whether from this home or the next home, you're ready. And in all of this, Nick, it's really the same old things. There's a bunch of tasks. The tasks need to be in certain order. You need to connect the data, like Paula said. You need to optimize your demand and inventory. It's the same traditional problem, but now agents are going to wake up and do continuously for you.
Okay, so Paul, I'm looking at this agentic AI, and you sort of mentioned this. Why? The question for, I'm sure some folks may be actually thinking about it. Well, we went through this robotic process automation. We went through optimization models, and we have been deploying those in pre-World War II. Why is it different? Why is this agentic AI different?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it comes up in a lot of conversations, Nick. What happened to RPA? We talk about automation, right? We've been doing that for a long time. I think where you start to get the differentiation is within something like RPA or automating any workflow is I know this task and it's well documented and I know exactly what to do. And it's just going through the motions of actually doing it. When we bring in AI agents in any type of agentic framework, we're taking that up another level where, Manju gave a great example of somebody who has to be able to balance demand and supply. Part of that involves reasoning and intelligent scenarios. Like, what if I do this? What if I do this? I need to pull this in. I can't make this customer unhappy, but I only have this much supply, but it's going to cost this. It's a complex reasoning that goes along with it as well. So now you're injecting levels of agents who can understand that, make recommendations, and perhaps even autonomously execute a decision associated with it. Now, you can still tie in human in the loop and things like that, but I think this is the great move of just automating a standardized workflow into something of truly having a sidekick, my own agent who's actually going to help me with the entire process.
So let's continue on that conversation. And Manju, I want to come back to you. So Paula, walk me through. So I know Google Cloud and market competition forces, there's a race to the top. There's so much capital being infused. Everybody wants to be the question race. Let's put some context to that race and speed. And how does Google Cloud play into some of the AI-driven intelligence that you guys are talking about, such as Vertex AI and Cortex framework? So just set the context up, and then I will Manju you to come back and give me a solid use case for your question. So, your thoughts on those? Some of the frameworks that you guys are building.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for bringing that up because I want to go back to the first point that I raised, and you kind of touched on it here. We can't do all this without data, right? Anything AI is going to operate on data. So where Google has been playing for quite some time is how do I find that data? How do I ingest it? How do I structure it in a format that can actually be used? And Nick, you mentioned our Cortex framework, which is an entire framework built and designed to be able to help capture that data, from, let's say, source ERP systems, et cetera, ingest that into Google Cloud, and then also structure it into a format that is usable. And in our case, of course, we're going to talk in terms of a supply chain and logistics context. So think about that as that starting point. Now, you mentioned the secondary layer, which is Vertex AI, and this is Google Cloud's overall AI-based platform. You can build all kinds of models. We went back to even coming up with any type of prediction model, right? That demand forecast, a labor forecast, a supply forecast, a capacity forecast. Now we're layering in on top of that again. So let's talk generative AI, which is part of that same AI platform where I want to do things like text to text. Nick, you mentioned earlier, hey, I might want to pull back information about maybe it's particular trade regulations in a particular region. Give me a report on that, right? Sometimes that's text to text. I asked it a question and it comes back with some type of summarized human structured language of a report back to me. But if we take that a step further, remember that AI and generative AI isn't just in one mode. It's not just text to text. But here we can think about multimodal use cases of text, audio, imagery, video, and even coding. Generative AI is playing in all those capacities. So think of a use case where I have a shipment coming into a warehouse. I take a picture of it or a video, and I have generative AI capabilities that assess how much damage is to that shipment and even link it back to a contract to understand the liability associated with that damage. So we now get that generative AI. Now let's hit into the entire agentic AI framework. And of course, you mentioned that's fast moving. And where Google Cloud plays in here is our introduction and launch of Agent Space that allows the creation of these intelligent agents, whether it's a demand agent that Manju talked about, a supply agent, maybe it is a customs clearance agent that's going to help us through the entire process of clearing a shipment across a global logistics trade path. The excitement is huge here, Nick, and I will say it's moving fast, and folks like Manju within his organization are capturing this new technology and applying it into the supply chain and logistics space very, very quickly.
Oh, such a great insight. And I'm so happy that you set up a step-by-step walk through all these different concepts into sort of weaving into the fabric of what the use case could look like. So Manju, Paula just defined these frameworks to be integrated, right? I mean, you can almost, I think, not only the predictive ways one can use this in generative AI, but also the descriptive way. Yeah. So give me a use case that you've been talking to one of the customer. You don't need to name the customer, but just tell me sort of walk us through.
Yeah.
What would in real life this means?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that we're talking about, but when it comes to real world, right, customers sometimes don't necessarily describe all this very organized manner, like the way Nick you did or Paula you did, right? We got this request in December. So just 3 months back, I'm talking about, hey, we need you to solve this complex inventory problem. And we need you to come in. You tell us what data you need, we are going to give it to you, and we can move fast. That's all, right? And it's a one-pager document saying that. And I'm like, okay, this is Latin America. We don't even speak proper Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, right? And how can I solve this problem? And fast forward, and I'll tell you the outcome, and then we'll work back to it. Right? So fast forward, they're live in production, bringing all their SAP and some non-SAP data in production, doing real-time rationalizing, connecting data across systems. They got a glimpse of how these agents work, and now they're making decisions on their products. The products are like, think of it like a combination of ceramic products, from dishes to toilets to forks and knives and spoons and bundles and many such household products that they make. And these are big companies in Latin America. and they sell around the world. So you think about something like that, right? They have a one-pager concept in December, and now they're live in production, connecting the data, and now having prescriptive and predictive capabilities on their inventory. It doesn't stop there. It goes into demand sensing. We are now looking at connecting 12 more systems, something that they couldn't imagine can be done so fast. But because Google runs on Cortex framework, we are able to leverage that and bundle that into our offering called iAgent or Planning Intelligence Agent, providing the simple, flat data model called master ledger. Give us how many your system, it's going to be in one massive data. Don't worry about billions and billions of rows. Google will take care of the performance. That's it. That's all you need to know. You need to bring all this data into one massive table, and we'll give you the agent. Let's start solving one problem at a time. Nick, for what was surprising to me is some of these conversations are with the CEO and the planner in the same call. The CEO is describing margin and profitability concerns, and the planner is saying how he makes the decision. But think about it. It's about this one massive table, and both are doing different levels of decision, optimizing supply chain network. They don't even talk the supply chain network optimization problem. But that's essentially what they're doing. And this is how fast things are moving. Hope that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. I mean, thanks for walking me through. So it looks like from December to now, we're in the middle of March. You think the technology is sophisticated enough to normalize the data, ingest the data, layering the agentic framework, and start to draw the insight.
Yeah.
That's relatively fast in comparison to previous optimization cycles that we've gone.
It's so fast that it's not the technology that's the problem, it's the change management that's the problem. Now, you deploy something now, even for somebody to understand, like Paula mentioned, in a very simplistic way, the reasoning thinking. These are capabilities that are pre-built. But for a planner, we have to give time for the planners to know that that power is already enabled. We are just not turning it on because we want to give them the room. It's like driverless cars. You want to give them the room to get comfortable with it before you open up the full self-driving mode.
And Manju, can I add to that?
Absolutely.
I love the example, Manju, that you said, you have the CEO and the planner all talking about this at the same time. And I think one thing that allows for the faster adoption, just not on the technology side, but it's how do I verify that the data that's being used and the output is actually grounded in my knowledge, right? So the ability to actually ground all of that information that's coming out and being processed through an agent, along with an output of something autonomously being executed. We have to ensure and get past that of having the grounding of all of the AI tied into verifiable sources of information. So that's tied into the enterprise. It's their enterprise knowledge, it's their enterprise data, it's their enterprise policies and pathwords. And so that's also going to be a key thing for both, Manju, for both the planner to validate it and the CEO, right?
So let's talk about it. I often, when I'm delivering keynotes to the master class, I often get asked about this, and I try to rationalize, and here's my thought, and I'd love for you guys to jump in. So AI obviously stands for the artificial intelligence, and I like to use that as more like an augmented intelligence. And Paula, to your point, I think this is not often get talked about it, is that enterprise intelligence is integrated. It's not like you're taking one agent from one enterprise and slapping it into something else and expect this. And I think there is very little conversation about that. This augmentation of know-how, and even if you go back, and I would use the term tribal knowledge, synthesizing those things are so important. So the business strategy and vision values that the CEO sets up, the people at the front executing the tasks day to day, it's all synchronized and somewhat systematized. Why this conversation is not in the forefront? How would you frame that up?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is, and let's just take this back, when all the generative AI excitement hit all of us, right? And we all were on our own devices and trying these things out, whether it's Google's Gemini or ChatGPT or what have you. The fact of the matter is that's a public setting, right? You and I and everybody are utilizing those underlying large language models to capture information, to help us write a report, you name it. But that's in a public setting. It's really consumer led. It's you and I operating, what do I want to do this weekend? Or I'm going to take a trip next week. The difference is when you start to take that same type of technology and apply it into an intelligent agent that's going to run part of your business, you're not operating on the same foundation, right? So there's this concept of what's being done in the public kind of consumer lens, but then also utilizing that technology that is within the enterprise four walls, grounded in your data. Because if I take Manju's example of the appliances and things of that nature, you take that one example, you can't even apply it to a similar competitor in that case, nor do you want to, right? So grounding it in enterprise information, insights, policies, procedures becomes paramount.
Very good. So let's touch on this, the elephant in the room, right? I mean, large language model and small language model. DeepSeek, a couple of weeks ago, came out and sort of shattered the world where we thought that the large language models, the ingesting gigantic data sets and drawing inferences and insight was the way to do it. Somehow, the paper published by the DeepSeek to that, hey, I don't need to consume that much resources. I mean, let me quantify that. The consumption from computing side and energy side on this large language model and in this AI world is significantly, and I'm talking about 30 to 40x to what the current consumption levels are. If you will, Paula, let's start with you and then I want to come to Manju, but how do you see, do you think there will be some transformation in the space where we'll start to optimize the resource consumptions and probably a little bit more efficient about what we ingest, for what reasons, and what we analyze, and not everything has to be large language model, but there's a mid-sized models and a small model, and we start to bifurcate these things. So I've been thinking about these things, but I'd love to gain your perspective.
Yeah, I think in general, Nick, there's a huge level of excitement when you see the ongoing innovation coming from multiple areas. That's what's going to innovate and move things forward even faster. When it comes to models, maybe two things. First off, I look at it and say, you use examples of this large language model, this one's coming out, et cetera. I wouldn't focus as much on the models themselves, but on a platform, because you're going to pick and choose. Models are going to continue to evolve. New ones are going to come out, but you need to be able to apply the right model to the right use case. So, that's where Google Cloud plays is, yes, we have our own models, but we also offer a platform that allows you to be able to pick and choose the models that make the most sense for the use case that you're working with. So I would encourage people, don't get overly hung up on each model, but think about a platform and a structure that's going to allow you to grow and expand many use cases to come. But the second thing, maybe I can use an example, Nick, where you talked about, the efficiency and the processing, et cetera. This holds true in any type of innovation that's going on, right? Which is a wonderful thing for the industry in general. But I can think back to the first flat screen plasma television I bought, okay? My reasoning was I had a very small family room and I had one of those big entertainment centers probably taking up, half the room. And I said, well, I can either try to build an addition to make my room bigger, or I can get rid of that and invest in a flat screen television that I can put over my fireplace, right? Went out and bought it, and I had to take out a credit card and a payment plan, right? It was thousands of dollars, and I'm paying, monthly installments on this, television set. Where are we today? hundreds of dollars to be able to buy these amazing television sets. So things are going to innovate. I don't see this type of area any differently. And I think it's great for the industry. And I think it's wonderful for organizations to be able to adopt it faster.
Yeah, absolutely. Paula, to tell you where we are today in terms of this plasma screen TV, I just saw the Costco was selling 100-inch TVs, and I was just blown away, not only with the size, 100-inch, but the cost. I mean, things have, again, the evolutionary curve of how quickly are we solving for these efficiencies across the spectrum. So talk to us, Manju, in your case, when you're talking about building the use cases and solving the real problem with AI and agentic frameworks, what concerns you have in terms of resource consumption that will be capable, or are you really depending on selling the value proposition and Google's ecosystem for them not to worry about those things?
Yeah, between the three of us, we have seen the internet rise and boom and bust and correction and eventual survival of the winners. I believe we're going to see something like that. Now, when we look at the resource consumption and associated with that is not just the resource cost of the technology of the stack, the models, the compute and memory and the costs and so on. That's one side what executives are worrying about, right? And the other side, which is kind of a sensitive topic, and depending on which customer we are with, they are more open versus the other, is the human labor cost, right? And can I do the same thing at much cheaper? Can I do this at a much cheaper cost? Can I run with Gemini versus Anthropic? And so they are worried about both sides of it, right, to solve a problem. But many times what we try to do, and I was with this customers who make garden materials, and their worry is about improving forecast accuracy, and they want to know, can you improve by 10%? And so if because the executives and the planners are all reading and they're all very smart people and generally mathematically and good decision makers, that's why they're in the role running for so many years. They know that something is coming. They're able to connect the dots to some extent. Then they come to us and say, tell me, how does this all come together? How does this all become platformized? Or they already use Ubers and the Lyfts and their Amazon.com. They know that supply chain can run faster. Decisions can be done faster. They know that, but it's not in their enterprise context. This is where, when we sit beside Google in front of a customer, obviously, the cost has to keep coming down. And the efficiency and the quality and the delivery efficiency has to go up, which is whether it's your OTEPs or inventory turns and reducing your safety stock. All of those things are different OKRs or KPIs that they want to continuously improve. And in my mind is very simple. This is not a mathematics, right? People are doing it. Now, these models can do it at cheaper rate and faster. And there's a point at which humans can beat it. And also, and I have a different philosophy about human labor reduction. I don't think that's what executives should worry about. There is a 10 to 20% mathematical error in most planning calculations, in both on the demand side and inventory side, call it forecast accuracy or inventory inaccuracy.
Forecasting error.
Yeah. And if they focus on that alone first, they're going to improve the revenue by 2 to 4%. And when tariff news was coming out last week or week before, and there's this big brand, shoes, which is very well-known brand. I just ran, not even the private data, just the public data, ran some DeepSeek models, not DeepSeek models, deep research models, Gemini and so on. It came up with $145 million exposure for that company. And I told somebody who was talking to the executive, say, go tell them they have an exposure of $145 million and you can get into the details. This is just public information. Now, imagine the power of private information. Right? And coming back to the costs are going to come down. We are building our models on Google Cloud and learning from all the innovations coming from both in the US and China, we are focused on making the life of the planner simpler and the executives at the same time, because both are under stress to improve the decision quality.
So let's, Manju, that's very good, but let's say if you were to throw the number, and Paula, I'll ask you the same question. What is expected ROI in the investment? Because that's one of the biggest fear every time I speak globally. Question is, I want to shy away because I feel there's a tremendous upfront cost. So ROI, let's just simply stick with the number, return on investment. What do you think the customer should expect?
Yeah,
Conservative.
yeah, Nick, we always have to prove ROI, especially with the AI projects. And we had to do this over the last 8 years working along with people, because people have all kinds of imagination about AI can do this, AI can do that, and so on, right? They have their own views and also fears whether AI is really ready. So we always had to go that. A year back, when somebody asked me this question, we would be careful in stating things because we do not know, are they ready for it, or will they really give us the data, or well, if you give a number, will they later not be ready for it, for the true transformation, and say the algorithm didn't work? So we went through a lot of rough rides with that and have scars from that. But as time progressed, we learned more and more. And today we are able to say that, let's say hypothetically, you're a $3 billion company, and this is literally what we put it on a single slide and show the customer and tell us if you're wrong. And this is how it goes. You're a $3 billion company. Let's say about 40% of your working capital is stuck between your factories, your DCs, your inventory, and the labor who is focused on this. And you would generally agree you have a 10% mathematical error on your forecast or inventory. And if you correct this even by 5%, using a lot of math, using AI and correcting your data, don't you think it will save about $20 to $40 million? And we put this number as ROI. And initially my reaction was, oh, people are going to say, you have no idea about our business, get out of the room, right? But then that's not what happened. So the first question that usually comes up is, how did you arrive at this? Right? That's the first thing they want to know. Second is, what are your assumptions? The third thing is, then they start tweaking their assumptions. Typically, we have 6 assumptions, right? Related to inventory, your forecast, and the shipping costs and so on, right? For the retailers, CPG. Now they start playing around with it. So the whole challenging us is no longer in picture. It's more about, give us the model, we want to do it ourselves as well. And we want to come up with a more accurate number, which tells that these numbers, which looks very big when you say we're going to just optimize your demand forecast and inventory between $20 to $60 million savings for a $3 billion company, it's not unreal. Now the question is, how real do you make it? You have to be on a 1-year journey.
Well, so when we're in business like this podcast where we demystify things, and numbers means a lot, and ROI means a lot. So I'm going to contextualize this for a global footprint. On about $20+ trillion, the supply chain plays some role. And I'm talking from sourcing, from design, all the way to delivery, and reverse logistics, decomposition, and so forth. Right? There is a clear evidence with about 30 to 35% waste built in. Waste built in because systems are solid. Upstream customers or suppliers don't trust downstream customers and suppliers, and likewise downstream don't trust upstream. So there's tremendous amount of redundancy, waste built into the system. If I look at that in totality, that I have a 30%, let's take conservative now, 30% waste built into our global supply chain network, all of it. Do I feel, and I have a number in my mind that I will share after yours, but that I believe there is some range that one would say that I can take that large waste bucket, if you will, and through this transformative stack of technology, agentic AI being one, because remember there's a blockchain, there's IoT and advanced robotics that goes into the manufacturing and those things. So when I say stack technology, including AI, what is your assessment about what percentage of that waste can be not only identified but eliminated.
Yeah, not sure I can give you a percentage number on that, Nick, but I love where you're going on this, and maybe I can tie it into a couple of different areas. We can look at it in the waste in terms of actual physical waste. Manju, I'm going to go back to your examples. If I'm not aligning demand and supply right and optimizing my inventory, what if I'm dealing with perishable products? Right now, I could talk about physical waste and imbalancing supply and demand. I could talk about the waste of driving empty miles and the transportation of all of that, right? Or movement of those within a warehouse facility, et cetera. So I kind of have that physical aspect. And I think that's a portion of what you're talking about, Nick. Now, if I bring it up to a level as well as what's the waste of all the supply chain professionals that they are doing that is really not value add? So taking it from the physical side to the digital side of a demand planner, a supply planner, a dispatcher, right? You name it. How much waste is there in their day-to-day efforts of running tasks and figuring things out? And hence in comes things like AI agents. So you have those pieces of the pie that start to stack up as well. Now, let me flip just one other side and maybe go back to the point that you were both talking about with ROI. We can look at ROI just in those buckets. But remember that we're not just cost optimization. Things that we can inject with AI can enhance customer service as well. So what if I'm now injecting that on the other side that allows me to capture revenue that I would have otherwise lost? So now I'm looking at top line, I'm looking at bottom line, and I could capture all of that together.
Absolutely, Paula. So it seems both of you sort of touched on it briefly, but didn't want to come to the number. Here's the analysis that at the Institute, Kendrick Global Supply Chain Institute, that we sort of highlighted. And one of the numbers that I'm coming close to, that it's a multi-trillion-dollar space in terms of the inefficiency. So I'm going to break this into three buckets where savings will come. So let's start with the one that we didn't touch, sustainability. When I talk about the waste, I'm not just wasting a time for you and I and everybody else. I'm talking about I consumed a finite resources the planet Earth has to offer, either over-designed, over-produced, wasted, didn't really utilize it, didn't design it correctly, that I ended up actually landfilling. If I just look at it from the sustainability bucket, this transformative forces that we're talking about can have a huge impact. So that is a ROI that I can actually bucketize from that side. And then we get into the physical part of the bucket, which is my second bucket. When you think about the movements of goods, and often it's all reactive, because I tend to do my scenario planning once the disaster happened. Think about all of those scenarios in which I can actually have both the predictive and prescriptive capability preemptively, trying to remove the friction from the physical movement side, which is huge, right? We talked about 35% built-in waste in multi-trillion-dollar opportunity space. That bucket is pretty dominant. And then, Paula, to your point, in the third bucket, which is in digital. And my bucket, number three, digital, includes the financial. Because the movements of capital also faces a friction. You think about the reason I brought up the blockchain, the smart contracts. I don't need an intermediary. I don't need 5 people to check something before the payment is executed. Imagine being able to utilize smart contract, digital tools, agentic AI frameworks, and transformative capability where not only these agents are independently functioning in given tasks, but imagine them connecting and drawing in enterprise insight and building intelligence that we talked about it. And if I justify that as my third bucket, now if I combine these three, I mean, just imagine the opportunities. So then that's what I believe, what gets me excited every morning to talk about the things we do. We teach about things we do in our Masters of Science in Global Supply Chain Management at USC are this phenomenal, what I call the gold rush of the century. I don't minimize the World Wide Web and internet penetration and where we are and subsequent industrial revolutions from there to the e-commerce and other things. Imagine those transformative moments just 25, 30 years ago would have been inconceivable. Imagine if we didn't have that, our lives with the COVID disruption. Would have been, we can't even contemplate if we were to design this and play out the scenario that if e-commerce wasn't there in brick mortar, the way we consumed for centuries had to be relieved under the COVID scenario we had. So think about those opportunity costs. And I start to add these things up. I think it's such a fascinating. So, Paula, with that, I'm going to come back to you, Manju, and you. Where are we going? Maybe 1, 3, and 5 years. Where do you see our world is transforming to?
Like, can I just make one comment before we pass to Paula?
Sure.
Because it's related to the numbers.
Yeah.
Right? Last
So
year,
touch on each of the buckets. I would love to hear your perspective. My 3 buckets are identified. Just provide your perspective, actually.
yeah, so you obviously have a much bigger view of the overall business impact and the dollar savings and the transformation effect that we laid out in the 3 buckets. When we look at our lens and we work with, let's look at the immediate 5,000 customers who we can make an impact working alongside our partners and solving these, just the inventory problem. And when we did our own math, just is an inventory in a wrong position where it shouldn't be. That itself, just in North America alone, added to $80 billion. That means if just in North America, these 5,000 companies solve this one problem, they will save $80 billion. That's the first number that came we arrived at that conclusion. And then we cascaded that, breaking down into depending on size of the company. And I just give you one customer who could potentially save $20 to $60 million. Right? When you add them up to the 5,000, it gets to $80 billion. And I'm not talking less to do. That's data point number 1. Data point number 2 is when we started looking at the 3 buckets, and we were not very sophisticated with the math, right? The way you described it, but it makes me think. A year back when we heard this whole AI, generative plus agentic plus physical AI or robots as collectively, because we do factory automation work, and I would walk into factory floors and say, if you had this today, and I would literally not describe the AI, just something that they can talk in Spanish or English and they will get an answer. They would come back and say, we say 12 million, we say 15 million. So they would come up with numbers like that. And these are people who run the factories. When I added up all, the collective number that we arrived at is this is going to be a $10 trillion industry impact. 10 trillion globally, just in the verticals and segments that we're looking at. That number sounds massive. You can add a couple of big giants and we could still not add up to 10 trillion. How can it be? But that is the magnifying effect of what we are saying. If there's so much of human labor impact or the magnifying effect of the outcome of AI. But again, some of it can be extrapolated. But again, I did want to highlight those numbers.
No, absolutely. And Paula, your perspective, I know I bucketize those 3 things, how we see this from an institute standpoint, the global landscape. And I want to just go back to your point and to reflect on, you talked about empty miles. The reason this buckets are interconnected, when Paula talks about empty miles, is about truck running empty, right? Unless it's completely electric, even then you're consuming electricity, you charge the batteries. But at some point, nothing moves in our universe without having an energy source. The source of energy could be physical energy, which is electricity or power, or it could be financial power, human power, or just simply the raw material. So wanted to sort of tie these things together. Well, I'd love to hear your perspective about how we're seeing these things at the Institute.
Yeah, so maybe I'm going to touch a little bit on the point that you raised there, Nick, on agents interworking and being interoperable with other agents, right? If you use the example, even Manju, going back to your demand and supply, I might come up with a demand plan, hand it off to somebody that then does a subsequent supply plan, that then hands it off to a production plan, that then ties it into an S&OP process, then hands it off to a dispatch, you name it. a lot of things are sequential in nature, but there's interconnectedness touch points that if those two can interoperate together, does a better decision come to be? So when we talk about these agents, they might be helping one particular function, but now bring those together and say how they're going to interoperate, agents working with agents. Wow, now we're unlocking optimization opportunities across the entire supply chain and not just functions within the supply chain. So there's going to be layers of it. So I love that example that you mentioned, Nick. Maybe the way that I would summarize this, we're in such a fast moving area. The technology is moving fast, but I tell you what, the adoption is moving fast. Manju's example of having a starting point and it's now in production just, weeks later is crazy. It's very different than what we were used to 20 years ago of implementing decision support systems, right? Those took 18 months, 24 months. Things are moving fast. So you combine the technology innovation with the adoption, and now we're unlocking these use cases and seeing tangible value-driven results. But if I were to summarize it, Nick, I look at it and say, we're at such a great inflection point, a pivot point when it comes to AI broadly, but also tying it into our world of supply chain and logistics. Number one, we're going to get faster insights, right? We can't make decisions without having the insights into our business, our broader supply chain network. So number one is faster insights. Number two is now we're going to unlock better decisions faster, right? With the faster insights, I'm going to make decisions faster and they're going to be better. And then number three is now we're going to get into the automating of it. It's a fun and exciting time to be in this space.
I completely agree with you, and I think that we are very excited. We're building some use cases at the Institute, trying to sort of, not only demystify, but also provide some sort of guideline and a roadmap to both the industry practitioners as well as the policymaker, how to make sense out of these transformative forces. So, Paula, as we close our conversation on this agentic AI and its implication on supply chain, I'd love to hear your perspective. 1, 3, 5, 10. Where are you? How do you see our world being transformed on all this front? And I want you to sort of holistically look at it, all the factors we talked about, the geopolitical, transformative, both AI and the stack of technologies. I mean, where do you see us?
Agents are going to be something that is going to be here and it's going to be sticky. I don't think it's a matter of, let's just kind of mess around with it. I think it's going to be an integral part of how we operate in our global supply chains. Take it back to when automation in the warehouse started, right? We had robotics coming in and automated systems and picking and packing, and it took aspects of what someone would have done manually. It operates in a hybrid environment today, right? How does the person in that facility interoperate with something that is automated? Same thing's going to happen on the agentic side of the house with what we're talking about here. So I would say, what does that start to mean to all of the supply chain professionals? How do they start to adapt? What are the skill sets that they need? Maybe they're not needing a statistics background anymore to analyze a forecast. Agents and technology are going to do that. Where do they start to invest in supply chain professionals' skill sets? So things like the critical thinking skills, the ability to interpret what's coming out of an agent, the ability to tell the story, to connect all the players in the supply chain, to bring people on board with what's going to happen that might be an output of an agent. So I think there's going to be some playing in. The adoption of it all is moving fast, and I think skill sets are going to continually adopt as that technology becomes more embedded.
Thank you, Paula, for your insight. Manju, how do you see this playing into 1, 3, 5 years out?
There are few things that as we go through this transformation, obviously this is incredibly fast. Every family at every dinner table, there are all kinds of conversation around what will our kids study and what should we worry about jobs. There are many things people worry about, especially when a change comes at an exponential rate. And maybe not the best analogy, but when nuclear bomb was invented, or nuclear energy was invented in the first place, yes, there is good and bad use of it, and people tend to over-exaggerate and imagine that world will destroy itself by putting bombs and everything. That's not what happened. Human mind expands to see the possibility. So that's naturally going to happen over the next 1 to 3 years. Second is human wisdom always prevails. So it means, okay, let's keep, as fear starts to subside that AI is not going to kill everybody or AI is not going to remove everybody's job. Once the fear starts subsiding over a few years, then the next generation of wave of natural evolution of human labor usage or human time usage with a combination of EQ and IQ, that's going to happen. That directly ties into what you have been talking about, folks, with human capital, right? And how you're a visionary in terms of thinking about even how you design your curriculum. So with that, the next labor force that's going to come into the market are going to be a lot more educated, a lot less biased, and a lot more ready for the market, yet they're also going to adapt. And that's going to happen. So that's the second part of it. And the world order is going to change in some regard, right? The world as we knew before World War II and after World War II, and the world order is going to change because of a combination of the new order, which is whether you talk in the form of labor, tariffs, trade wars, labor shift, where manufacturing will happen, how money will get exchanged, how wastage will be reduced, because we have a new form of intelligence. The new form of intelligence is, in some ways, is going to be better than human intelligence. In some ways, it won't. And knowing where it won't is equally important as what it can. And most of the time, people tend to think about what it can and dismiss everything what people do. Lean Six Sigma is not going away. In fact, it's going to be more. Network optimization is not going to go away. It's going to be more. Supply chain concepts is not going away. It's going to be more. But we are going to be doing with a lot of robots and a lot of AI, which is get embedded where to a point where we will not use the words robots and AI as independent data and all these as independent blocks, but it just naturally bundles into a new way of running supply chain. That's over the 10-year horizon. So in 3 years, humans will get ready. In 5 years, enterprises will transform. Those who don't transform will fade away gradually or at a rapid pace. And in 10 years, we have a very different world that we see.
Very good, very good. So let me sort of provide my perspective for this. As we go back, and I'm not dating myself, but my previous generation would have actually driven and asked for the directions. And typical stop sign you're dating for them, you stop over at the gas stations or the dairy or its convenience store, and then you ask people, and you get about 3 or 4 different answers, but eventually you make it to your destiny. Then invention of Thomas Stop. And for those of you who have never used it, it was a book that you carry in your car, and you know where your destination is, where you're starting from, and then it takes you through a series of pages, and you write on a piece of paper your directions, and you drive, and then it became actually a bit more efficient. Then now you have navigation in your app, which tells you not only which route to take, but if there is an accident, it optimizes and says, hey, there's a shorter route available, or there's a delay here, and you have an option to actually bypass. That is intelligence. That is a progression of technology making our lives simpler, easier, better. Today, 26% of the stuff that you consume in your day-to-day lives, you're clicking and somebody ships it, we show up at your doorstep, within plus or minus 10 minutes, it shows up. So think about when you step back from the noise of this AI and gentle conversation, we have been actually exposed to this technology and backdrop of these technologies for a while. We've been desensitized because now that has become the fabric of our lives. I see this 135 in which AI and this transformative technology step will penetrate deep in the fabric of our day-to-day life. Not only the way only we consume and live, but interact with others and how we manage ourselves. How do we create not only the smart cities and smart nations, but really smart people and smart planet. Before we used to choose one at the cost of the other. Hopefully within 1, 3, 5 years, we learned that all of those things can happen. Yes, we can chew the gum and walk at the same time. So to me, that's what excites me. I'm an optimist that the technology can really transform the world. And guess what? Who came up with this rule that we have to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week? Maybe we only work 25. And that's all it takes to produce same amount of output we create today, or even better. So then why not adapt and embrace the amazing opportunity space ahead of us? Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Manju. Thanks for being here. It's so great to have these conversations with both of you guys. And with that, I bid you guys an incredible, amazing rest of your journey. I'm Professor Nick Diaz, the Executive Director at Kendrick Global Supply Chain Institute. Until next time, fight on.
We hope you enjoyed another exciting episode of Supply Chain Demystified. Stay tuned for the next demystifying discussion on the supply chain. Visit uscsupplychain.com to stay up to date on all things supply chain.